I was sitting at our kitchen counter, scrolling through my phone when the notification popped up. My husband Marco had tagged me in a post, our 5-year anniversary photo with the caption, "Still can't believe I found my perfect match." The irony wasn't lost on me. Just 3 hours earlier, he'd looked me straight in the eyes and said those words I couldn't shake. "It's not mine. It can't be." The pregnancy test had sat between us on the bathroom counter like a live grenade. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning had started like any other Tuesday. I woke up early, made coffee, and prepared for my shift at the hospital where I worked as a nurse. Marco had already left for his construction site. At least that's what the note on the fridge said. It wasn't until I felt that wave of nausea hit me again, the third morning in a row, that I decided to take the test that had been sitting in our medicine cabinet for weeks. 2 pink lines appeared almost immediately. I remember staring at them, my hands trembling slightly, not with fear but with a strange mix of surprise and joy. Marco and I had been trying for nearly 2 years. After the devastating miscarriage last spring, we'd almost given up hope, yet here it was, positive. I took a photo and sent it to Marco with a simple heart emoji. His response came 3 hours later, not as a text but as him bursting through the front door, his face flushed and eyes wild. He didn't hug me, he didn't smile. Instead, he paced our living room, running his hands through his dark hair. "It's not mine," he said finally, his voice strangely calm. "It can't be." I remember feeling like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Marco wouldn't look at me. "I had a vasectomy 6 months ago," he said. "After your miscarriage. I didn't want to risk putting you through that again." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. 6 months ago. A medical procedure I knew nothing about. A decision made without me. "You did what?" I managed to say, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. He finally met my eyes. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I thought it would be easier this way." "Easier?" The word hung between us. "The doctor said it was successful," he continued, as if explaining something mundane like why he chose a particular brand of coffee. "There's no way I could have gotten you pregnant. So this..." He gestured vaguely toward my stomach. "This isn't mine." I sat down slowly on our gray couch, the one we'd picked out together last year, planning for a future that suddenly seemed like a cruel joke. My mind raced through the implications. He thought I'd cheated. He thought the life growing inside me belonged to someone else. "I've never been with anyone else," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Not once in 5 years." Marco laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Then explain how you're pregnant when I can't have children." I couldn't. I had no explanation that would make sense. I just knew what was true. I had been faithful, completely and utterly faithful. That night, Marco slept in the guest room. I lay awake in our bed, my hand resting on my stomach, trying to comprehend how my life had shattered so completely in a single day. By morning, something had shifted inside me. The shock had given way to a cold clarity. I didn't cry when Marco left for work without saying goodbye. I didn't beg him to believe me. Instead, I called my doctor and scheduled an appointment. Then I called in sick to the hospital, the first time I'd done so in over a year. While waiting for my appointment later that week, I noticed other signs I'd missed. Marco had been guarding his phone more carefully in recent months. There were unexplained late nights at work, weekend errands that took hours longer than they should have. All things I'd brushed aside, making excuses for him in my head, because that's what you do when you love someone. You give them the benefit of the doubt. But the vasectomy was different. That wasn't a forgotten text message or a mysterious receipt. That was a deliberate choice to alter our future without my knowledge or consent. During my lunch break at work, I found myself opening a new note on my phone. I titled it simply, Timeline. I started with the date of my miscarriage, then added what I could remember, when Marco's behavior began to change, when the late nights started, when he began to grow distant. Dr. Reynolds confirmed my pregnancy during my appointment. "About 8 weeks along," she said with a smile that faded when she saw my expression. "Is everything okay, Olivia?" I told her about Marco's claim. About the vasectomy I knew nothing about. She looked troubled. "That's unusual. Vasectomies aren't 100% effective, you know. There's a small failure rate." "How small?" I asked. "Less than 1%. But it happens. Would you like me to refer you to a specialist who could look into this further?" I nodded, feeling the first flicker of something that might have been hope. Or maybe just determination. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. That evening, when Marco came home, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open. He hesitated in the doorway, as if unsure of his welcome in his own home. "I have an appointment with Dr. Sharma next week," I said without looking up. "He specializes in male fertility." Marco set his keys down with deliberate care. "Why?" "Because vasectomies can fail," I said, meeting his eyes. "It's rare, but it happens." He shook his head. "Mine didn't fail. The doctor did multiple tests afterward." "Then you won't mind coming with me to confirm that," I said, my voice level. His jaw tightened. "This is ridiculous, Olivia. We both know what happened here." "No," I said quietly. "We don't. He didn't come to the appointment." I went alone, explained the situation to Dr. Sharma, who listened without judgment. "There are a few possibilities here," he said. "Either your husband never had the procedure, it failed, or I've been unfaithful," I finished for him. He nodded once. "I can't help with the third option, but I can verify the first two. We would need your husband to come in for testing." I thanked him and left, knowing Marco would never voluntarily show up. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with a text from him. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." It was becoming our new normal. He came home late, left early, avoided being alone with me. When we did occupy the same space, the silence was deafening. I continued adding to my timeline, noting dates, times, inconsistencies in his stories. One evening, while searching for a receipt for our tax records, I found something tucked in the back of Marco's desk drawer, a business card for a Dr. Geller, urologist. The name meant nothing to me, but the discovery sent a chill through me. This could be the doctor who performed the vasectomy. I tucked the card into my wallet, another piece of a puzzle I was just beginning to assemble. 12 weeks into my pregnancy, I started showing. Not obviously, just a small curve that only I would notice. Marco's eyes flickered to my stomach once during breakfast, then away quickly, as if he couldn't bear to look. He'd stopped asking about the baby entirely. In his mind, it wasn't his concern. "I have the first ultrasound next week," I said, breaking our careful silence. "Would you like to come?" He set down his coffee mug with exaggerated care. "Why would I do that?" The coldness in his voice should have hurt, but I'd grown numb to it. "Because despite what you believe, this is your child." Marco laughed, a harsh sound that echoed in our kitchen. "Keep telling yourself that, Olivia." I went to the ultrasound alone, watched as the technician pointed out the tiny fluttering heartbeat, the forming limbs, the perfect little profile. "Would you like to know the sex?" she asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "It's a boy," she said with a smile. "A son. We were having a son." I cried then, not because Marco wasn't there, but because in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I would do whatever it took to protect this child, even if that meant facing the truth about my marriage. That evening, I called Dr. Geller's office. "I'm Marco Reyes's wife," I said when the receptionist answered. "I'm trying to schedule his follow-up appointment, but I've misplaced the details." There was a pause, the sound of keys clicking. Mr. Reyes had his initial consultation in January, but he never scheduled the procedure. "Would you like to set that up now?" My hand tightened around the phone. "No," I managed to say. "I'll have him call back." January, 6 months ago. He'd had a consultation but never gone through with the procedure. He had lied. Not just about telling me, but about having a vasectomy at all. But why? Why claim sterility when he wasn't? Why accuse me of infidelity when there was no reason to doubt my faithfulness? The questions circled in my mind as I drove to the pharmacy to pick up my prenatal vitamins. I was so distracted that I almost didn't notice her. A woman about my age, with dark curly hair, standing at the prescription counter. It wasn't her appearance that caught my attention, but the name the pharmacist called. "Ms. Valdez, your prescription is ready." Valdez, Marco's secretary. The one he'd mentioned occasionally, but whom I'd never met. I'd seen her name on texts that popped up on his phone. Elena Valdez. She turned, and I ducked behind a display of sunscreen. When she passed by, I glimpsed her profile and the slight but unmistakable curve of her stomach under her flowing top. Something cold and hard settled in my chest. It wasn't proof, not yet, but it was enough to make me follow her to the parking lot. Enough to note the license plate of her blue Hyundai. Enough to add another entry to my timeline. At home, I searched through our files until I found our health insurance statements. There it was, an office visit to Dr. Geller in January, billed as a consultation. Nothing after that. No procedure, no follow-ups, just the single visit. I was filling in the blanks now, constructing a narrative that made a terrible kind of sense. Marco hadn't wanted more children. Not with me. The miscarriage had been difficult, yes, but we'd agreed to try again. At least I thought we had. The next day, I called in sick again and did something I'd never imagined doing. I drove to Marco's construction site. He was a foreman, overseeing a new apartment complex on the east side of town. I parked across the street, watching. It was nearly noon when I saw him emerge from the trailer that served as the site office, but he wasn't alone. Elena Valdez was with him, her hand resting briefly on his arm as they talked. I took photos with my phone, not because I needed them for myself. I knew what I was seeing, but because I was starting to understand that evidence mattered. Truth mattered. And I would need both. That night, Marco came home to find me sitting calmly at the kitchen table, a folder open in front of me. "We need to talk," I said. He sighed, dropping his keys in the bowl by the door. "About what?" "About your vasectomy," I said. "The one you never had." His expression flickered, surprise, then something harder to read. "What are you talking about?" I slid a printed copy of the insurance statement across the table. "You had a consultation with Dr. Geller in January, that's all. No procedure." Marco stared at the paper, then at me. "You've been going through my medical records?" "And Elena Valdez," I continued, ignoring his question. "Is she pregnant too?" The color drained from his face. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw genuine fear in his eyes. "How did you... Does it matter?" I interrupted. "Is she?" His silence was answer enough. "So let me understand," I said, my voice remarkably steady despite the storm raging inside me. "You got your secretary pregnant. You panicked. And instead of telling the truth, you invented a vasectomy and accused me of cheating when I got pregnant too." Marco sank into the chair opposite me. "It wasn't like that." "Then tell me what it was like," I said. "I'm listening." He ran his hands over his face. "Elena and it was a mistake. One time, after the company holiday party, I was drunk, upset about the miscarriage. It didn't mean anything. And when she told you she was pregnant, I panicked," he admitted. "I was going to tell you, but then you got pregnant too, and I couldn't handle 2 pregnant women. 2 babies. I thought if I said I'd had a vasectomy, you'd admit you'd been with someone else, and we'd, I don't know, split up. Clean break." The coldness of his calculations stunned me. "You were willing to gaslight me, to make me question my own reality, rather than admit you cheated?" He looked away. "I'm sorry." 2 words. As if they could erase weeks of accusations, of cold shoulders, of making me feel like I was losing my mind. "Does she know about me?" I asked. "About my pregnancy?" Marco shook his head. "No, I told her I'd leave you, but I needed time." I nodded slowly, processing this final betrayal. "I see." We sat in silence for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, I closed the folder and stood up. I have an appointment tomorrow, I said. For a paternity test. It's early, but they can do it now. Non-invasive. Just a blood draw from me. Marco looked up, confusion clear on his face. Why? We know it's mine now. Because I need proof, I said simply. Not for you, for me. The waiting room at Westlake Medical Center was quieter than I expected. I'd chosen the earliest appointment possible, hoping to avoid curious glances or awkward encounters with anyone who might know Marco or me. The receptionist handed me a clipboard with forms to fill out, her eyes briefly flickering to my barely visible bump before returning to her computer screen. I checked the box for prenatal DNA testing and filled in my information methodically. When I reached the section asking for the father's details, my pen hesitated above the paper. It seemed surreal to be sitting here, 16 weeks pregnant, having to scientifically verify that my husband was the father of my child. A husband who had spent weeks convincing me I had been unfaithful, all to cover his own infidelity. Mrs. Reyes? A nurse appeared in the doorway, smiling professionally. We're ready for you. The procedure was simpler than I'd imagined. Just a blood draw from my arm, the nurse explaining that they could isolate the baby's DNA from my bloodstream. The results take about a week, she said, placing a cotton ball over the needle mark. Will the father be coming in for his sample today? No, I said quietly. I have something else for comparison. From my purse, I removed a sealed plastic bag containing Marco's electric razor. The nurse raised an eyebrow but took it without comment. I had researched this thoroughly. Hair follicles would provide enough DNA for the comparison. As I left the clinic, my phone buzzed with a text from Marco. Where are you? Your car's gone. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I drove to the coffee shop 3 blocks from our house, ordered a decaf latte, and sat by the window watching people hurry past in the morning rush. Normal people with normal lives who hadn't discovered their marriages were built on lies. Finally, I texted back. Had an early appointment. Be home soon. When I returned, Marco was sitting at the kitchen table, still in his pajama bottoms and white t-shirt, looking strangely vulnerable. He glanced up when I entered, his eyes bloodshot from what I assumed was a sleepless night. Did you do it? He asked. The paternity test? I set my keys down deliberately. Yes. And when will we know? About a week, I said, removing my jacket and hanging it by the door, every movement measured and calm despite the storm inside me. Marco nodded, then surprised me by saying, I called in sick today. I thought maybe we could talk. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Now he wanted to talk? After weeks of cold shoulders and accusations? About what? I asked. He gestured vaguely around our kitchen, as if the answer lay somewhere between the refrigerator and the potted herbs dying on the windowsill. About us. About what happens next. I sat down across from him, maintaining the physical and emotional distance that had grown between us. What do you think happens next, Marco? He looked down at his hands. I don't know. I messed up. Badly. But this is still my child. Our child. That has to mean something. It means something to me, I said quietly. I'm not sure what it means to you. His head snapped up. What's that supposed to mean? It means you were willing to deny this child was yours. To accuse me of something I never did. To make me question my own sanity. My voice remained steady, surprising even me. All to cover up your own mistake. Elena was a mistake, he said, emphasizing the word as if it could diminish what he'd done. One night. It didn't mean anything, and yet you told her you'd leave me for her. He flinched. I panicked. When she told me she was pregnant, I didn't know what to do. I never meant for any of this to happen. I studied him, this man I had loved for 5 years, trying to reconcile the Marco I thought I knew with the one sitting before me now. What did you think would happen when both babies were born? Did you think no one would notice they were half-siblings? That you could keep living 2 separate lives indefinitely? Marco ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache despite everything. I wasn't thinking that far ahead. I was just trying to get through each day without everything falling apart. Everything is already apart, I said softly. We sat in silence for several minutes, the ticking of the kitchen clock the only sound between us. Finally, Marco spoke again. What do you want, Olivia? Do you want me to move out? Do you want a divorce? The questions hung in the air between us. What did I want? A week ago, I would have said I wanted things to go back to normal. But normal had been a facade, a carefully constructed fiction that had crumbled the moment Marco claimed a vasectomy he never had. I want time, I said at last. Time to think. To process all of this. He nodded slowly. I can stay with my brother for a while. Give you space. The offer surprised me. It was the first considerate thing he'd said in weeks. That might be best. Marco packed a duffel bag while I sat in the living room, staring at the ultrasound picture I'd placed on the coffee table. My son. Our son. Despite everything, there was still this tiny life connecting us. When Marco was ready to leave, he paused in the doorway. I am sorry, Olivia. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am. I didn't respond. Sorry seemed inadequate for the scope of his deception. After he left, the house felt eerily quiet. I moved through the rooms aimlessly, touching familiar objects that suddenly seemed like artifacts from someone else's life. The wedding photo on the mantel, the throw blanket we'd bought on our weekend trip to the mountains, the coffee mug he'd given me last Christmas with "World's Best Wife" printed on it in fading letters. I stopped in front of the spare bedroom, the room we'd planned to turn into a nursery after the miscarriage. I hadn't been inside for months. Taking a deep breath, I turned the knob and pushed the door open. It was exactly as we'd left it. Bare walls. Empty space. Potential without fulfillment. I placed my hand on my growing stomach and made a silent promise to my son. You will be loved. You will be protected. You will know the truth. The next day, I called my sister Camilla and told her everything. She listened without interrupting, then said simply, I'm coming over. 2 hours later, she was at my door with a suitcase. I'm staying with you for a while, she announced, brushing past me into the hallway. No arguments. Having Camilla there changed something. The house no longer felt like a museum of my failed marriage, but a space where healing might be possible. She cooked dinner while I told her more details, her indignation on my behalf both comforting and validating. Have you told Mom and Dad? She asked as we washed dishes side by side. I shook my head. Not yet. I wanted to wait for the paternity test results. Have something concrete before I started that conversation. Camilla handed me a plate to dry. They'll support you no matter what. You know that, right? I nodded, though uncertainty gnawed at me. Our parents had loved Marco from the beginning, had welcomed him into our family with open arms. Would they believe what he'd done? Or would they, like Marco had intended, wonder if I'd been the unfaithful one? 3 days after Marco moved out, I received a text from an unknown number. Is it true? Are you pregnant too? This is Elena. I stared at the message for a long time, unsure how to respond, or if I should respond at all. Finally, I typed, yes, 16 weeks. Her reply came quickly. We need to talk, please. We arranged to meet at a park halfway between our homes. I spotted her immediately, sitting on a bench near the playground, her pregnancy more visible than mine in a fitted maternity top. She was pretty in a conventional way, dark hair, olive skin, brown eyes that widened when she saw me approach. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice higher than I'd imagined. I sat beside her, maintaining a careful distance. What did you want to talk about? Elena looked down at her hands, twisting a silver ring around her finger. Marco told me everything last night. About you being pregnant. About lying to both of us. She glanced up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. I swear, I didn't know he was planning to leave you for me. He told me you were separated, that you'd grown apart after the miscarriage. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Another lie in Marco's growing collection. We weren't separated, I said simply. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I know that now. I feel so stupid. And I'm sorry. You must hate me. I studied her, this woman who was carrying my husband's child, and found that hatred wasn't what I felt. I don't hate you, I said truthfully. You didn't know. You didn't promise me fidelity. Elena released a shaky breath. What are you going to do? About Marco, I mean. It was the question I'd been asking myself for days. I don't know yet. I'm still processing everything. Me too, she admitted. I never pictured myself as a single mother, but I don't think I can be with him now. Not after this. We sat in silence for a moment, two pregnant women linked by the same man's betrayal, watching children play on the swings nearby. Our babies will be half-siblings, Elena said softly. They should know each other, don't you think? Regardless of what happens with Marco. The thought had occurred to me too. These children, innocent in all of this, connected by blood. Yes, I agreed. They should know each other. We exchanged phone numbers, properly this time, and a tentative plan to stay in touch. As we parted ways, Elena turned back. For what it's worth, I think you're handling this with incredible grace. I'm not sure I could be so composed if our situations were reversed. I didn't feel graceful or composed. I felt like I was barely holding myself together with tape and willpower. But her words stayed with me as I drove home, a reminder that strength often looks different from the outside than it feels from within. The paternity test results arrived exactly 1 week after my appointment. The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for hours before I found the courage to open it. Camilla offered to be with me when I did, but this felt like something I needed to face alone. Finally, as evening settled around the house, I tore open the envelope and unfolded the clinical-looking letter inside. Based on the analysis of 16 genetic markers, the probability of paternity is 9,998%. The alleged father, Marco Reyes, cannot be excluded as the biological father of the tested child. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. Not tears of relief or joy, but of a complicated grief for the trust that had been irreparably broken. Marco was the father of my child, a fact I had never truly doubted despite his accusations. But the confirmation brought no triumph, only the weight of decisions still to be made. I texted Marco a simple message. The test confirms you're the father. His response came minutes later. Can I come home? Can we talk? I hesitated, my thumbs hovering over the screen. Finally, I typed, Not tonight. I need more time. That night, I dreamed of holding my son, his tiny fingers wrapped around mine, his eyes, Marco's eyes, looking up at me with complete trust. I woke with tears on my pillow and a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. The next morning, I called my parents and told them everything. My mother gasped when I described Marco's accusations. My father's silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes about his anger. Come home, sweetheart, my mother urged. Stay with us until the baby comes. The offer was tempting, to retreat to my childhood home, to let my parents shield me from the fallout of my marriage. But something inside me resisted. Thank you, Mom, but I need to face this here, in my own space. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and began researching prenatal classes for single mothers, legal rights in cases of separation during pregnancy, support groups for women in similar situations. I was preparing, not just for my child's birth, but for a life I hadn't anticipated. In the midst of this research, my phone rang. Marco, I got an apartment, he said when I answered. A 2-bedroom. For when the baby comes to stay with me. The statement caught me off guard. He was planning for shared custody, for a life as a part-time father. It was both reasonable and jarring. That's good, I managed to say. I'm seeing a therapist, he continued, trying to understand why I did what I did. It doesn't excuse anything, but I want to be better. For our son. I didn't know how to respond to this version of Marco, contrite, proactive, planning for fatherhood when weeks ago he had denied any possibility of it. What about Elena? I asked. And her baby? There was a pause. We're figuring that out too. She's due a month before you. It's complicated, but I'm not running away from my responsibilities anymore. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the ultrasound picture I'd framed and placed there. The path forward wasn't clear, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I could see possibilities beyond the pain. Camila found me there, still contemplating the grainy image of my son. "You okay?" she asked, setting a cup of tea in front of me. "No," I said honestly, "but I will be." That evening, I started a journal, not of grievances or timelines, but of hopes and plans for my child and myself. On the first page, I wrote, "Your story begins with complexity, but it will not be defined by it." As the weeks passed, my body changed, the evidence of my pregnancy impossible to ignore. I returned to work at the hospital, facing the curious glances and whispered conversations with my head held high. When asked about Marco, I developed a simple response. "We're taking some time apart while preparing for our son's arrival." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was enough for colleagues and acquaintances. The full story belonged to me, to Marco, to Elena, and eventually to our children. At 24 weeks, I attended my first prenatal class alone. The room was filled with couples, their excitement palpable as they practiced breathing techniques and discussed birth plans. I sat in the back, feeling conspicuously single until another woman sat beside me. "First baby?" she asked with a warm smile. I nodded. "Yours too?" "Second," she said. "First one I'm doing on my own, though. My ex decided fatherhood wasn't for him." Her candor was refreshing after weeks of careful conversations. "I'm Olivia," I said, offering my hand. "Diane," she replied, her grip firm and reassuring. "Trust me, you've got this. It's scary as hell, but you're stronger than you think." By the end of the class, we'd exchanged phone numbers and plans to meet for coffee. It was my first step toward building a community that wasn't tied to my life with Marco, a community of my own choosing. When I returned home that night, there was a package on my doorstep. No note, just a box containing a mobile for the nursery, delicate paper stars that would glow softly in the dark. I knew without being told that it was from Marco. A peace offering. A small act of acknowledgement. I hung it above the crib I'd assembled myself in the spare room that was slowly transforming into a nursery. The stars spun gently in the breeze from the open window, casting faint shadows on the freshly painted yellow walls. Standing there, watching those stars turn, I felt a flutter in my stomach. My son moving, reminding me of his presence, his reality beyond the drama of his conception. I placed my hand over the spot and whispered, "We're going to be okay." That night, I added to my journal, "Today I felt you move and remembered that this journey isn't about what was lost, but what is being found. You are teaching me to be brave in ways I never imagined." Elena called me on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when I was 28 weeks pregnant. Her voice sounded different, strained yet somehow lighter. "She's here," she said without preamble. "My daughter. She came early." I sat down on the edge of my bed, one hand automatically going to my own rounded belly. "Is she okay? Are you okay?" "We're both fine. She's tiny but perfect. 5 pounds, 3 ounces. There was a pause, then Elena continued more softly. "I named her Sophia." "That's beautiful," I said, genuinely happy for her despite the complicated circumstances. "Marco was here for the birth," she added, and I felt a twinge of something I couldn't quite name. Not jealousy exactly, but a sharp awareness of how our lives were now irrevocably connected through these children. "Has he seen her?" I asked. "Yes. He's been surprisingly present. He comes every day, brings whatever I need." "He's trying, Olivia." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "I'm glad. Sophia deserves that." After we hung up, I sat for a long time, staring out at the rain streaking down my bedroom window. Marco was a father now. Not just in theory or anticipation, but in reality. He had a daughter with another woman, a fact that would have seemed impossible 6 months ago. That evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Marco stood on the porch, looking exhausted but somehow transformed. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, but there was something different about him. A gravity I hadn't seen before. "Can I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside, allowing him into the home we'd once shared. He glanced around as if seeing it for the first time, then his eyes settled on me, on the prominent curve of my stomach. "You've seen her?" I asked. already knowing the answer. He nodded. Sophia, she's so small, Olivia, so perfect. I gestured toward the living room and we sat across from each other, me on the couch, him in the armchair he used to claim as his spot for watching football games on Sundays. I keep thinking I don't deserve this, he said quietly. Any of it. Her, our son, you, after what I did. I didn't rush to reassure him. His actions had consequences, and we were all living with them now. I've been seeing that therapist, he continued when I didn't speak, trying to understand why I did what I did. It doesn't excuse anything, but... He trailed off, running a hand over his face. My father cheated on my mother. Did you know that? I shook my head. Marco had rarely spoken about his parents' divorce when he was 12. He had a whole second family. 2 kids my brothers and I knew nothing about. When it all came out, everything exploded. And somehow, I've become him. Marco's voice broke. The thing I swore I'd never be. Something shifted in me then. Not forgiveness exactly, but a deeper understanding of the man I'd married. The wounds he carried. The patterns he'd repeated despite his intentions. You're not your father, I said finally. You're making different choices now. Marco looked up, his eyes glistening. I want to be in our son's life, Olivia. Really in it. Not just visits and child support. I want to be a real father to him. And to Sophia. I want that too, I admitted. For him to know his father. To know his sister. We talked for hours that night. More honestly than we had in months, perhaps years. About our fears, our hopes for our children, the shape our lives might take moving forward. We didn't resolve everything. Some wounds were still too fresh, some trust too broken. But it was a beginning. When Marco left, he hesitated at the door. Would it be okay if I came to your next ultrasound? I've missed so much already. The request surprised me, but I found myself nodding. It's next Thursday. 2:00. His smile was cautious but genuine. I'll be there. True to his word, Marco met me in the waiting room the following Thursday, arriving 15 minutes early with a bottle of water and a small gift bag. For you, he said, handing me the bag. Inside was a simple silver bracelet with 2 charms, a star and a crescent moon. I remembered how you always loved looking at the night sky, he explained as I examined it. Thought it might be a good reminder that even in dark times there's still beauty. The thoughtfulness of the gift caught me off guard. It was the kind of gesture Marco would have made when we first met, observant, meaningful, before our relationship had become cluttered with resentments and routines. During the ultrasound, Marco watched in awe as our son appeared on the screen, his tiny hand seeming to wave at us. He's got your nose, Marco whispered, and for a moment, we were just 2 parents marveling at the miracle we'd created. After the appointment, we walked to a nearby cafe, an unspoken agreement to extend our time together. Over decaf coffee and pastries, Marco told me about his first days with Sophia. She has this way of gripping my finger, he said, demonstrating with his own hand. Like she's saying, I'm here, pay attention. I smiled, recognizing the wonder in his voice. How is Elena doing? Tired. Overwhelmed sometimes. Her mother's staying with her, which helps. He hesitated, then added, I've been trying to give her space while still being there for Sophia. It's a delicate balance. I nodded, understanding all too well the complicated dance we were all performing now. What about you? Marco asked. How are you really doing, Olivia? The question was simple but profound. The first time in months he'd asked about me with genuine interest rather than guilt or obligation. I'm finding my way, I said honestly. Some days are harder than others, but I'm stronger than I knew. Marco's eyes held mine. You always were. I just didn't always see it. As autumn turned to winter, my due date approached. The nursery was complete, painted in soft yellows and greens, the mobile of stars hanging above the crib. My sister had organized a small baby shower with close friends and family, people who knew the situation and supported me without judgment. Elena came, bringing a hand-knitted blanket for my son and stories about Sophia's first weeks. We sat together on my parents' back porch, two women linked by circumstance, forging an unexpected friendship from the ruins of betrayal. I never thought I'd say this, Elena admitted as we watched the other guests mingle inside, but I'm grateful to know you. Not for how it happened, but for who you are. I squeezed her hand, unable to express how her presence had helped heal something in me, how seeing her care for Sophia, navigate co-parenting with Marco, and rebuild her life had shown me it was possible to move forward with grace. Marco didn't attend the shower. We'd agreed it would be too awkward, but he came the next day to help assemble the remaining furniture. I watched from the doorway as he meticulously followed the instructions for the changing table, his brow furrowed in concentration. You know, I said, leaning against the doorframe. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined this scenario. He looked up, a rueful smile crossing his face. Me putting together baby furniture while my pregnant wife watches from a distance? That, and the fact that we're having civil conversations despite everything. Marco set down the screwdriver. I don't deserve your civility, Olivia. I know that. This isn't about what you deserve, I said quietly. It's about what our son deserves. And what I need to heal. He nodded, understanding. Have you thought more about us? What happens after he's born? It was a question I'd been contemplating for weeks. The divorce papers sat unsigned in my desk drawer, a possibility, but not yet a certainty. I don't think we can go back, I said finally. Too much has changed. But I also don't think we need to rush into legal decisions right now. We can co-parent, figure out what works for us and for the children. Relief crossed his face. That sounds reasonable. Thank you. As my due date approached, I took maternity leave from the hospital. The days stretched before me, filled with last-minute preparations and quiet reflection. I wrote in my journal daily now, messages to my son about the world he would soon enter, about the complicated family that awaited him. You will have parents who love you, I wrote one evening. They may not live together, but they will both be there for you. You will have a sister who shares half your blood, and you will have me, always, completely. On a cold January morning, 3 weeks before my due date, I woke to strong contractions and a sense that something had changed. I called Marco first, then my sister. By the time they arrived, my water had broken, and the contractions were coming faster than I'd expected. The drive to the hospital passed in a blur of pain and anticipation. Marco held my hand in the back seat while Camilla drove, his face a mixture of concern and excitement. Remember your breathing, he coached as another contraction hit. Just like we practiced. In the delivery room, things progressed quickly. Too quickly for the epidural I'd planned, leaving me facing the full force of labor with only breathing techniques and determination. I can't do this, I gasped after a particularly violent contraction. Marco's face appeared above mine, his eyes locked on mine. Yes, you can, Olivia. You're the strongest person I know. Our son is almost here. I clung to those words as the pain intensified, focusing on the strength he saw in me, the strength I needed to find. And then, with one final tremendous push, our son entered the world, red-faced and indignant, his cry filling the room with new life. It's a boy, the doctor announced, placing him on my chest. A healthy baby boy. I stared down at him in wonder, this tiny person who had been growing inside me, who had been the center of so much turmoil and now was simply, perfectly himself. His eyes opened briefly, dark and unfocused, before closing again as he nestled against me. Marco stood beside us, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. He's beautiful, he whispered, just like his mother. We named him Leo, for the constellation, for the courage it took to bring him into this complicated world. 7 pounds, 4 ounces of possibility and promise. The first few days of Leo's life were a haze of visitors, feeding schedules, and profound exhaustion. My parents came, cooing over their grandson and tentatively rebuilding their relationship with Marco. Camilla stayed with me, a constant support as I navigated the physical recovery and emotional adjustment of new motherhood. On Leo's 3rd day, Elena brought Sophia to meet her half-brother. I watched as she carefully placed the 3-month-old beside Leo in the bassinet, their tiny forms side by side. They look alike, Elena observed softly. Around the eyes. She was right. Despite their different mothers, both children had inherited Marco's deep-set eyes and the slight dimple in their left cheek when they yawned. They'll always have each other, I said, a fact that brought unexpected comfort. Whatever happened between the adults in their lives, these siblings would share a bond that couldn't be undone. When Leo was 2 weeks old, Marco came to help me with the nighttime feeding. He arrived at midnight, letting himself in with the key I'd given him for emergencies. I was already up, walking the living room floor with a fussing Leo. "Here," Marco said, reaching for him. "Let me take a turn. You should rest." I handed over our son, watching as Marco cradled him expertly, whispering soft reassurances. He'd had practice now, with Sophia, learning the rhythms and needs of an infant. "Go sleep," he urged. "I've got this." Too exhausted to argue, I retreated to my bedroom, falling into a deep sleep almost instantly. When I woke 3 hours later, the longest stretch I'd slept since Leo's birth, I found Marco dozing on the living room couch, Leo sleeping peacefully on his chest. The sight stirred something in me, not a rekindling of romantic love, but a recognition of the father Marco was becoming. Different from the husband he had been, but valuable in his own right. As the weeks passed, we established a rhythm of shared parenting. Marco came every evening after work, taking Leo so I could shower or eat an uninterrupted meal. On weekends, he took both children, giving Elena and me each a few hours to ourselves. One Saturday, about 2 months after Leo's birth, I returned from a much-needed massage to find Marco in my kitchen, both babies asleep in their respective carriers. While he prepared dinner, "Hope you don't mind," he said, stirring something that smelled like my mother's enchilada recipe. "I thought you might be hungry when you got back." I set my purse down, taking in the domestic scene. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to." He gestured toward the table, already set for 2. "Sit. It's almost ready." Over dinner, Marco told me about his week, a promotion at work, Sophia's first attempt at rolling over, the parenting class he'd started attending on Wednesday nights. "I want to do better," he said simply. "Be better." I believed him. The man sitting across from me was not the same one who had coldly accused me of infidelity 9 months ago. He had faced his mistakes, accepted their consequences, and was actively working to create something new from the wreckage. "I've been thinking," I said as we cleared the dishes together, "about Leo's baptism. I'd like to do it next month, when he's a bit bigger." Marco nodded. "Whatever you want. Just tell me when and where." I hesitated, then added, "I'd like Sophia to be there too, as his sister. And Elena, if she's comfortable with that." Marco's hands stilled on the plate he was rinsing. "You would?" "They're family," I said simply. "Leo's family. And if we're going to do this, raise these children to know and love each other, then we need to start as we mean to go on." He turned to face me, his expression serious. "You're remarkable, Olivia. I don't think I tell you that enough." The baptism was held on a bright spring Sunday, the church filled with family and friends who had supported us through the tumultuous year. Leo, resplendent in a christening gown that had been in my family for generations, behaved perfectly, gazing solemnly at the priest as water was poured over his dark curls. Sophia, now 6 months old and sitting on Elena's lap, watched the proceedings with wide-eyed fascination, occasionally reaching toward her brother as if sensing their connection. Afterward, we gathered at my parents' house for a celebration. I stood on the back porch, watching as Marco moved between groups, Sophia in one arm, Leo in the other, proudly introducing his children to distant relatives and old friends. My mother appeared beside me, following my gaze. "He's changed," she observed cautiously. "Yes," I agreed. "We all have." She squeezed my hand. "Are you happy, sweetheart, with how things are?" It was a complicated question. Was I happy with how my marriage had ended? With the betrayal that had led us here? No. But was I finding peace, purpose, even joy in the life I was building now? Yes. "I'm getting there," I told her honestly, day by day. Later, as guests began to leave, I found Marco sitting alone on the porch swing, both babies now asleep and their carriers nearby. "Thank you for today," he said as I sat beside him, "for including all of us." I nodded, watching the late afternoon sun filter through the oak trees. "I've been thinking about forgiveness lately," I said quietly, "not as something you earn or deserve, but as something I choose. For myself as much as for you." Marco turned to look at me, his expressions solemn. "What have you decided?" "That I can forgive you without forgetting. That I can move forward without moving back. That our children deserve parents who have made peace with the past, even if they can't share a future." He was silent for a long moment, absorbing my words. "I think that's wise," he said finally, "and brave." As twilight descended, we gathered our sleeping children and prepared to go our separate ways. Marco to his apartment with Sophia, who would stay with him tonight, and me to my house with Leo. But something had shifted between us. A tension released. A new understanding reached. Standing by our cars, Marco hesitated, then said, "Elena is moving to Phoenix next month. Her company is transferring her. She wants to make a fresh start." The news surprised me. "What about Sophia? About you?" "We've worked it out. I'll have her for long weekends, holidays, summers when she's older. It's not ideal, but we'll make it work." He sighed. "It's probably for the best. Elena deserves a chance to rebuild without the constant reminder of how things started." I nodded, understanding. Another change. Another adjustment in our already complicated family dynamics. "We'll figure it out," I said. "One day at a time." As I drove home that evening, Leo sleeping peacefully in his car seat, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. The pregnancy test that had revealed not just a new life, but the truth about my marriage. The pain of betrayal, the shock of accusation, the slow, deliberate process of rebuilding. Nothing had turned out as I'd planned or expected. The future I'd envisioned with Marco had crumbled, replaced by something messier, but perhaps more authentic. We were no longer husband and wife, but we would always be connected through the children we loved. At home, I settled Leo in his crib, then stood watching him sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. "Your story is just beginning," I whispered. "And so is mine." The garden chairs felt cool against my skin as I sat on my newly finished patio, watching Leo take cautious steps across the grass. At 14 months old, he was a determined explorer, each fall followed by a stubborn push back to his feet. Marco sat nearby, ready to catch him if needed, but mostly letting our son find his own balance. "He's got your determination," Marco observed as Leo conquered the small incline leading to the flower beds. I smiled, recognizing the truth in his words. The past 2 years had taught me just how determined I could be when necessary. "And your curiosity," I added. Nothing escapes his notice. It was a warm Sunday in March, one of those perfect spring days that seemed designed for family gatherings. Elena and Sophia would be arriving soon for our monthly lunch, a tradition we'd established after Elena's move to Phoenix 6 months ago. Despite the distance, we'd remained committed to keeping the siblings connected, to building a family that defied conventional boundaries. The divorce had been finalized 3 months earlier, a surprisingly amicable process once we'd agreed on the essential points of co-parenting. The house remained mine, while Marco kept his apartment across town, close enough for regular visits, but with enough distance to build our separate lives. My phone chimed with a text from Elena. "Running about 15 minutes late." Sophia fell asleep in the car on the way from the airport. I showed the message to Marco, who nodded. "I'll keep the quiche warm." This easy coordination, this peaceful coexistence, had not come easily. It had been built day by day, conversation by conversation, with the children's well-being as our unwavering priority. There had been difficult moments, holidays to navigate, boundaries to establish, emotions to process, but we had found our way through them with growing maturity. The sound of a car pulling into the driveway announced Elena's arrival. Leo looked up at the noise, his face breaking into a delighted grin. At 20 months old, Sophia had become his favorite playmate, their bond transcending the complications of their origins. "Look who's here," I said, lifting Leo into my arms as we went to greet them. Elena emerged from the rental car, looking relaxed and confident in a way she hadn't when I first met her. Phoenix had been good for her, a place to reinvent herself away from the whispers and judgments that had followed her here. She waved as she opened the back door to unbuckle Sophia. "Sorry, we're late," she called. Someone decided airplane nap time wasn't necessary after all. Sophia toddled toward us, her dark curls bouncing with each step. "Leo!" she exclaimed, one of the few words she pronounced perfectly. I set Leo down, watching as the siblings embraced with the uncomplicated affection of children too young to understand the adult complexities surrounding them. In moments like these, the pain of the past seemed distant, overshadowed by the joy these two brought into our lives. Over lunch, we caught up on the past month's events. Elena had received a promotion at her architectural firm. Marco's construction company had landed a major contract for a new community center. I had been offered a leadership position in the hospital's nursing department, a recognition of the quiet strength I'd demonstrated through personal and professional challenges. "To new beginnings," Elena proposed, raising her glass of lemonade. We clinked glasses, the simple toast acknowledging how far we had all come. As we ate, the conversation flowed easily, punctuated by the children's laughter and occasional demands for attention. There was a comfort in this gathering that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. After lunch, while Marco and Elena supervised the children in the backyard, I retreated to the kitchen to prepare coffee. Through the window, I watched Sophia show Leo how to throw a ball, her patient demonstrations a mirror of Elena's methodical nature. "Need any help?" The voice startled me. My sister Camila stood in the doorway, arriving for her usual Sunday afternoon visit. "Just in time," I smiled, handing her cups to arrange on the tray. Camilla glanced out the window, observing the scene in the garden. "It's still remarkable to me," she said quietly, "how you've all created this, whatever this is." "Family," I said simply, "just not the kind they write about in storybooks." She nodded, studying my face. "Are you happy, Liv? Really happy?" It wasn't the first time I'd been asked this question, but my answer had evolved over time. "I'm fulfilled," I replied after a moment. "I've built something meaningful from what could have destroyed me. That brings its own kind of happiness." Camilla squeezed my shoulder, a gesture of understanding and respect. "You've shown Leo what resilience looks like. That's a powerful gift." We carried the coffee outside, joining the others on the patio. As conversations resumed and laughter filled the air, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought us here. The pregnancy test that had revealed not just new life, but the truth about my marriage. The accusation that had shattered my trust. The DNA results that had confirmed what I already knew in my heart. Each painful moment had been a stepping stone to this present, imperfect, unexpected, but rich with authentic connection. Later that evening, after Elena and Sophia had left for their hotel, and Marco had gone home with plans to return the next day, I sat in Leo's room, watching him sleep. His tiny chest rose and fell rhythmically, one arm flung above his head in complete abandon. "You've changed my life in ways I never imagined," I whispered, gently stroking his cheek. "You taught me that family isn't always what we expect, but it's what we build with love and intention." The nursery had evolved as Leo had grown, the stars mobile now accompanied by pictures of both sides of his extended family. A photo of Leo and Sophia at her second birthday party, Marco holding both children at the beach, my parents with their grandchildren. A tapestry of connections that told the story of who we were becoming. As spring turned to summer, new opportunities emerged. The leadership position at the hospital brought fresh challenges and rewards, stretching my professional skills in ways that paralleled my personal growth. My confidence, once shaken by Marco's betrayal, had been rebuilt stronger and more authentic than before. One warm Tuesday evening, I arrived home to find a package on my doorstep, a small box wrapped in simple brown paper. Inside was a leather-bound journal with my initials embossed on the cover. The accompanying note read, "For the next chapter of your story, M." It was a thoughtful gift, acknowledging both my love of writing and the journey we had shared. I texted Marco a brief thanks, appreciating the gesture without reading more into it than was there. Our relationship had found its new form, respectful co-parents with a shared history but separate futures. That night I opened the journal and began to write, not about the past but about the present, about Leo's latest adventures, about the woman I was becoming, about the life I was building on my own terms. "Today I realized something," I wrote. "The moment Marco denied his paternity was actually the beginning of my own rebirth. Not because it ended our marriage, but because it forced me to recognize my own strength. To stand in my truth when someone else tried to rewrite it. The insight felt significant, a reframing of what had once seemed only painful into something that had ultimately proven transformative." The following weekend brought an unexpected encounter. While shopping for Leo's upcoming birthday, I ran into Marco's mother, Vivian, in the toy store. Our relationship had been strained since the separation, her loyalty to her son creating an awkward distance between us. "Olivia," she said, clearly surprised to see me. "How are you?" "I'm well," I replied, shifting Leo to my other hip. "We're picking out presents for his birthday next week." Vivian's eyes softened as she looked at her grandson. "He's getting so big." An uncomfortable silence fell between us, filled with unspoken history. Finally, Vivian spoke again, her voice quieter. "I owe you an apology, Olivia. When Marco first told me what happened, I didn't believe you. I thought—" She trailed off. "You thought what any mother might think," I finished for her, "that your son couldn't have done what he was accused of." She nodded, her eyes filling with tears. "But he did, and you've been remarkably gracious about it all. The way you've handled everything with the children, with Elena. It's been a lesson in dignity." Her words touched me, an unexpected validation of the choices I'd made. "We all just want what's best for Leo and Sophia," I said simply. "Would you—" She hesitated. "Would you allow me to host Leo's birthday party at my house? Nothing elaborate, just family. Both families. It would mean a lot to me." The offer surprised me. Vivian had always been protective of family traditions, viewing them as her domain. This invitation represented more than a party. It was an acknowledgement of the new family structure we had created. "I think that would be lovely," I said, watching relief wash over her face. The birthday celebration at Vivian's house became another milestone in our evolving family story. Elena and Sophia flew in for the weekend. My parents and Camila attended, initially cautious but gradually relaxing as the day progressed. Marco's brothers and their families completed the gathering, creating a circle of love around Leo as he gleefully smashed his first birthday cake. I stood slightly apart at one point, watching the scene unfold, this unconventional family united by love for two small children. Marco caught my eye from across the room and raised his glass slightly, a silent acknowledgement of what we had managed to create from the ruins of our marriage. That evening, after returning home with a tired and happy Leo, I added to my journal, "Today I witnessed the family we've built. Not the one I imagined, but perhaps the one we all needed. There is healing in honesty, in facing truth, rather than hiding from it. Leo will grow up knowing that mistakes don't define us. It's how we repair what's broken that matters." As summer progressed, I found myself reconnecting with parts of myself that had been submerged during my marriage. I joined a hiking group that met on Saturday mornings when Leo was with Marco. I resumed painting, setting up an easel in the spare bedroom that had once been designated as a home office. I cultivated friendships that were entirely my own, separate from my identity as Marco's wife or even Leo's mother. "You're blooming," my mother observed during one of her visits. "It's beautiful to see." Her comment stayed with me, a recognition of the personal renaissance I was experiencing. The pain hadn't disappeared. There were still moments when memories of betrayal surfaced unexpectedly, but they no longer defined me. They had become part of my story, not its conclusion. In August, Elena called with unexpected news. I've met someone, she said, her voice tentative but happy. His name is David. He's an environmental engineer, divorced with a daughter close to Sophia's age. That's wonderful, I said, genuinely pleased for her. How long have you been seeing him? About 3 months. I wanted to be sure before I mentioned it, especially with Sophia involved. She paused. I've told him everything. About Marco, about how Sophia came to be. He understands our situation, and he respects the relationship Sophia has with her father and with Leo. He sounds thoughtful, I replied, appreciating her consideration in how she approached this new relationship. I wanted you to know before I told Marco, she continued, since it affects all of us now. Her words highlighted the intricate connections we maintained. How changes in one part of our extended family rippled through to affect everyone. I appreciate that. When will you tell him? This weekend. Sophia and I are flying in on Friday for her monthly visit. I thought about Marco's potential reaction, the complicated emotions this news might trigger. Would you like me to be there when you tell him? As a buffer? Elena's relief was audible. Would you? That would make it easier. Thank you, Olivia. The conversation with Marco took place in my living room, the children playing in the backyard under Camilla's supervision. Elena explained about David carefully, emphasizing his respect for Marco's place in Sophia's life. Marco was quiet at first, processing the information. Then he asked practical questions. How serious the relationship was, what David was like with Sophia, how they plan to handle visits moving forward. I'm happy for you, he said finally, his sincerity evident. Sophia deserves all the love she can get. The maturity of his response marked how far he had come, how far we all had come, in accepting the new shapes our lives had taken. Later, when Elena had taken Sophia back to their hotel, Marco lingered, helping me clean up from dinner. You're not seeing anyone, are you? He asked suddenly, the question catching me off guard. No, I answered truthfully. I'm not ready for that yet. He nodded, seemingly relieved. I'm not either. Sometimes I think I should be, that it would be the normal next step. But it doesn't feel right. There's no timeline for healing, I said, putting away the last of the dishes. We each move at our own pace. Marco leaned against the counter, studying me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't lied about the vasectomy? If I'd just told you the truth about Elena from the beginning? The question was unexpected. We rarely discussed hypothetical alternatives to our shared history. Sometimes, I admitted, but it doesn't change where we are now. Where we are now is better than I deserve, he said quietly. I shook my head. This isn't about deserving. It's about creating something healthy for our children and for ourselves. Marco nodded, accepting this perspective. You've taught me a lot, Olivia, about dignity, about forgiveness, about what real strength looks like. His words reminded me of how profoundly we had influenced each other, even through the dissolution of our marriage. We had shaped each other's growth, painful as the process had sometimes been. As autumn approached, bringing cooler temperatures and changing leaves, I felt a corresponding shift within myself. The raw edges of hurt had smoothed, leaving clarity in their place. I could look at my journey with perspective now, seeing not just what had been lost, but what had been gained. One crisp October morning, I sat on my front porch with a cup of coffee, watching the neighborhood come alive. Leo was with Marco for the weekend, giving me rare quiet time to reflect and recharge. My phone buzzed with a text from Diane, the single mother I'd met at prenatal classes who had become a close friend. Coffee at Riverdale Park? The kids can play while we catch up. I texted back my agreement, grateful for the friendship that had developed between us. Diane's journey as a single mother had both paralleled and diverged from mine, giving us rich ground for connection and mutual support. At the park, as our children played on the swings, Diane asked the question that had been on my mind lately. Do you think you'll ever trust enough to try again? To fall in love? I watched Leo launch himself down the slide, his joyful fearlessness, a constant inspiration. I think so, I said slowly. Not because I need someone to complete me, but but because I've learned that vulnerability takes more courage than self-protection. Diane nodded, understanding. You're not the same woman who thought her husband's betrayal defined her. No, I agreed. I'm the woman who discovered her own strength through that betrayal. That evening, I made a decision I'd been considering for weeks. Opening my laptop, I began typing. When the test was positive, how a pregnancy revealed my truth. The words flowed easily, my story unfolding paragraph by paragraph, not as a victim's account, but as a testament to resilience and reinvention. I wrote through the night, pouring my experience onto the digital page with honesty and reflection. By morning, I had completed a draft of what would eventually become both a personal catharsis and an inspiration to others facing similar challenges. The act of shaping my narrative, of claiming it as my own, felt like the final step in my journey from betrayal to self-reclamation. When Marco brought Leo home that afternoon, he noticed the change in me immediately. You seem different today, he observed as Leo ran to show me the painting he'd made at his father's apartment. I smiled, feeling the truth of his observation. I've been writing my story, I said simply. Marco nodded, understanding the significance. It's a powerful one. It's still being written, I replied, lifting Leo into my arms and breathing in his familiar scent of sunshine and sandbox. Every day. As Marco prepared to leave, he paused at the door. You know, when I said those words, when I denied Leo was mine, it was the biggest mistake of my life. But watching you rise from that moment has been remarkable, Olivia. You've built something beautiful from what I tried to destroy. His acknowledgement touched something deep within me, a recognition of how far we had both traveled from that devastating moment in our bathroom, the pregnancy test between us like a ticking bomb. We've both built something, I corrected gently, something neither of us could have imagined then. After he left, I sat with Leo on our living room floor, building towers of blocks that he delighted in knocking down. With each collapse, he would look to me for reassurance, then begin building again, a tiny mirror of the resilience I had discovered in myself. Again, Mama, he demanded, his eyes shining with determination. Again, I agreed, helping him stack the blocks higher than before. We always build again. That night, I added a final entry to the journal Marco had given me, completing the circle of reflection it had initiated. 2 years ago, a single sentence nearly shattered my world. It's not mine. It can't be. Today, I understand that moment was actually the beginning of my liberation. From a marriage built on shaky foundations, from limiting beliefs about myself, from the fear of standing alone. The DNA results shocked him, but they empowered me. They confirmed what I already knew. Not just about Leo's paternity, but about my own integrity. In that confirmation, I found the strength to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self. Our family doesn't look like I once thought it would. It's more complex, more inclusive, more authentic. Leo will grow up surrounded by people who chose to transform pain into purpose, betrayal into growth, ending into beginning. And I will continue becoming the woman who emerged from that bathroom 2 years ago, the woman who held a pregnancy test in one hand and her truth in the other, and refused to let either go. I closed the journal, feeling a sense of completion. Not an ending, but a milestone on a continuing journey. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new growth, new opportunities to demonstrate the resilience I had discovered within myself. But tonight, I rested in the knowledge that my story, like my son, was both a gift and a responsibility. A reminder that even our deepest wounds can become sources of unexpected strength, if we have the courage to claim them as part of our truth. The conference room buzzed with anticipation as I arranged my notes at the podium. 5 years had passed since that moment in my bathroom, staring in disbelief at Marco's reaction to my pregnancy test. Now I stood before a room full of women who had gathered for the annual Rebuilding After Betrayal retreat, an event that had grown from a small support group I'd started in my living room to a nationwide network of resilience and healing. When I was asked to share my story today, I began, looking out at the attentive faces. I wondered which version to tell. The one where I was a victim of gaslighting and betrayal? Or the one where that betrayal became the catalyst for the most profound growth of my life? The room was silent, women leaning forward slightly in their chairs, many nodding in recognition of the dilemma. I chose the second version, I continued, not because it erases the pain of the first, but because it honors what came after. What I built from the ruins. As I spoke, I caught sight of Diane slipping into the back of the room, giving me an encouraging thumbs up. Our friendship had deepened over the years, our children growing up together, our shared experiences as single mothers creating an unbreakable bond. When my husband looked me in the eyes and said, "It's not mine," about the baby I was carrying, something broke inside me, I acknowledged. But something else awakened. A voice that had been quiet for too long said, "I know my truth, and I will stand in it, even if I stand alone." I shared the story of the paternity test, of discovering Marco's affair with Elena, of the complex family we had ultimately created around our children. I spoke honestly about the pain, but focused on the transformation, how each challenge had revealed strengths I hadn't known I possessed. The DNA results didn't just shock my husband, I said, coming to the heart of my message. They became the scientific proof of what I already knew in my soul, that I was a woman of integrity, standing in her truth. That validation wasn't for him. It was for me. As I concluded my presentation, the applause was warm and genuine. Women approached afterward, some with tears in their eyes, others with determined expressions that told me they recognized their own potential for rebirth in my journey. "Your book changed my life," one woman said, clutching a well-worn copy of When the Test Was Positive, the memoir that had started as late-night typing and evolved into a beacon for others navigating similar waters. It gave me permission to rebuild on my own terms. Her words humbled me, a reminder of how our most personal struggles can become bridges to others walking similar paths. Later that evening, I drove home along familiar streets, the setting sun painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Leo would be waiting at home with my mother, who had offered to watch him during the conference. At 6 years old, he was a thoughtful, curious child with Marco's intuitive nature and my determined spirit. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Marco's car already parked at the curb. Tonight was our monthly family dinner, another tradition we'd established to maintain connection between all members of our unconventional family. Elena and Sophia would be arriving from Phoenix, where they now lived with David, who had become Sophia's stepfather 2 years ago. Inside, the house was alive with activity. Leo and Sophia, now 7, were setting the table together, arguing good-naturedly about the proper placement of forks. My mother was in the kitchen with Marco, supervising his preparation of the paella we'd all come to love at these gatherings. "Mama!" Leo exclaimed, running to embrace me. "I lost another tooth at school today." I knelt to examine the new gap in his smile, marveling at how quickly he was growing. "That's wonderful. Did you put it under your pillow for the tooth fairy?" He nodded solemnly. Dad said the tooth fairy might bring something extra special since it's family dinner night. I caught Marco's eye over Leo's head, sharing a small smile at our son's excitement. These moments of parental complicity had become precious, reminders that despite everything, we had succeeded in creating something positive from our shared past. Elena arrived with Sophia and David, bringing dessert and news of Sophia's recent dance recital. The dynamic between Elena and me had evolved into something neither of us could have predicted. Not quite friendship in the traditional sense, but a deep mutual respect built on our shared commitment to our children's well-being. As we gathered around the table, I looked at the faces surrounding me. Marco, now a dedicated father to both children. Elena and David, who had created their own loving family unit. My mother, who had supported me through every step of my journey. And most precious of all, Leo and Sophia, half-siblings whose bond transcended the complications of their origins. "I'd like to propose a toast," David said, raising his glass. "To family, not defined by convention, but by choice and commitment." We clinked glasses, the simple ritual acknowledging the extraordinary reality we had created together. After dinner, while the others chatted in the living room, Marco helped me clear the table, falling into the easy rhythm we'd established over years of co-parenting. "How was the conference?" he asked, loading the dishwasher with practiced efficiency. "Meaningful," I replied. It's still surprising to me sometimes how something that caused so much pain has become a way to help others. Marco nodded, his expression thoughtful. You've always had that ability to transform difficulty into something worthwhile. Coming from him, the observation carried particular weight. He, more than anyone, had witnessed both my lowest moments and my subsequent rise. We've all transformed, I acknowledged. You're not the same man who denied his child. No, he agreed quietly. That man was afraid. Of responsibility. Of consequence. Of his own capacity for failure. I'm grateful every day that you gave me the chance to become someone better. His honesty touched me. The journey hadn't been easy for either of us. But we had each found our way to growth and accountability. As the evening wound down, Elena approached me privately while the children showed David a new game on the tablet. I've been meaning to tell you, she said, her voice low. Sophia's teacher asked each student to write about their hero for a class project. Sophia wrote about you. Surprise rendered me momentarily speechless. Me? Why? Elena smiled. She wrote that you showed her what forgiveness looks like. That you taught her family can be bigger than what other people think it should be. Tears pricked my eyes at this unexpected gift. The recognition that our efforts to transform a painful situation had created not just stability for our children, but a powerful model of resilience and grace. After our guests departed, Leo asked me to read him a bedtime story, a ritual we still maintained even as he grew increasingly independent. Snuggled beside him in his bed, surrounded by the books and toys that reflected his developing personality, I felt a profound contentment. Mama, he said sleepily as I finished the story, Ms. Johnson says every family is different. Is our family very different? I considered how to answer, wanting to honor both the uniqueness of our situation and its fundamental normalcy. Our family has a special story, I said finally. It didn't follow the path I expected, but it led us exactly where we needed to be, together, in different ways. He nodded, processing this explanation with the seriousness he often displayed. I like our family, he declared. Even the complicated parts. Even the complicated parts, I agreed, kissing his forehead as his eyes drifted closed. Later that night, I sat on my back porch, enjoying the peaceful solitude. The journal Marco had given me years ago rested in my lap, its pages now filled with reflections, insights, and milestones from our journey. I opened it to a blank page near the end and began to write. Today I spoke to a room full of women about rising from betrayal. I told them that healing isn't linear, that rebuilding takes time, that forgiveness is a practice rather than a destination. What I didn't tell them, what perhaps I'm still learning myself, is that sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest teachers. 6 years ago, when Marco denied his paternity, I felt as though my foundation had crumbled. I couldn't imagine then that from those ruins would rise something stronger, more authentic, more beautiful in its complexity. The DNA results that shocked him became my vindication, but they were only the beginning of the story. What followed was harder, messier, and ultimately more rewarding than any path I could have envisioned. I've learned that family isn't defined by blood tests or legal documents, but by daily choices to show up, to communicate honestly, to prioritize love over ego. Leo and Sophia have taught me that children see beyond adult complications to the essential truth, that they are loved, that they belong, that they connect us in ways that transcend our mistakes and misunderstandings. Marco and I will never again be husband and wife, but we have become something perhaps more meaningful. Partners in raising our son, architects of a family structure built on respect rather than resentment, co-creators of a legacy of resilience for our children. Elena, once the other woman in my narrative, has become an ally in this unconventional journey. Together, we've demonstrated that women need not be pitted against each other by men's choices, that we can forge our own connections based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Most importantly, I've discovered that the woman who stood in that bathroom 6 years ago, pregnancy test in hand, facing an accusation that threatened to destroy her, was stronger than she knew. She didn't just survive betrayal, she used it as a catalyst to reclaim her voice, her power, her autonomy. That woman, the one who refused to accept a false narrative about herself, is the one I'm most proud to have become. Not because she never faltered or doubted, but because when faced with the choice between accepting someone else's lies or standing in her truth, she chose truth, even when it meant standing alone. Except I was never truly alone. There was always the child growing within me, the one whose existence sparked both crisis and revelation. Leo became both my anchor and my sail, keeping me grounded while propelling me forward into a future I couldn't yet imagine. The shock of those DNA results wasn't just Marco's. It was mine, too. Not the confirmation of paternity, which I never doubted, but the realization that sometimes truth needs no external validation. That sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply know our own heart and stand firmly in that knowledge, regardless of who believes us. If I could go back and whisper something to that woman in the bathroom, tears streaming down her face as her husband accused her of infidelity, I would tell her this: the test results will vindicate you, but your greatest victory won't be proving him wrong. It will be discovering who you are beyond his perception, the strength, wisdom, and compassion that will emerge from this breaking point. This moment isn't the end of your story, it's barely even the beginning. I closed the journal, feeling the fullness of the journey it contained. Outside, the night was clear, stars visible despite the city lights. I remembered how, in those early days after Marco's accusation, I would look up at those same stars and feel impossibly small and alone. Now I felt connected to myself, to my children, to the expanded definition of family we had created together, and to the women whose lives had been touched by my willingness to share this journey. The pregnancy test that had once seemed like an ending had instead become a beginning, not just of Leo's life, but of my own rebirth. The DNA results that shocked Marco had liberated me, setting in motion a transformation none of us could have predicted. As I prepared to go inside, my phone lit up with a text from a number I didn't recognize. Heard you speak today. For the first time, I believe I can rebuild too. Thank you for your courage. I smiled, knowing that my story, with all its pain and redemption, had become a bridge for someone else to cross from despair to possibility. Perhaps that had been the purpose all along. Not just to survive betrayal, but to transform it into a beacon for others navigating similar waters. Inside, I paused at Leo's doorway, watching him sleep peacefully, untroubled by the complex history that had preceded his birth. In the soft glow of his nightlight, I whispered the truth that had sustained me through the darkest moments and the brightest triumphs. Our stories don't define us. How we rewrite them does.